Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Soulganize Your Life podcast. And today I am very excited to welcome Haley Caddis to the podcast. She's the co-founder of Not Therapy. And as a therapist, that was one of the favorite things I've ever heard in my life. And we're going to talk about why that is. But anyway, Haley, what we do here on the podcast is pretty straightforward. We discuss how the outer circumstances of our lives stimulate our inner environment in two very distinct ways. One of those ways is through what I would call as a therapist, the psychological ego. And the second way is what I would call the soul, which is our divine connection to all that is. Why do I think it's important to know the difference? Well, that's where you come in as our expert guest to help us relate to this very deep inner conflict within all of us and help us integrate it into one beautiful, messy human experience. So anyway, Haley, thank you so much again for being here. And please finish introducing yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And, hearing a therapist call me a expert guest is very, very satisfying. So thank you for that intro. But yeah, just quickly. So I started Not Therapy about a year and a half ago, a little over a year and a half ago, with my co-founder, Colin, who will also be on the podcast. And he and I were what we like to call former troubled teens, really struggled with our mental health through, mental illness, external behaviors like substance abuse, self-harm, suicidal ideation, suicide attempt. Honestly, like the whole gamut of things when we were teens. And so for me, my parents decided when I was 16, I needed to go to a wilderness therapy program and like a long-term residential treatment program. And so Colin has a similar story. And that was really like my first foray into understanding even what mental health was and ego and soul and all of those things. And so fast forward, I worked in STEM. I was a chemical engineer. I did all these different things in my career in my 20s and kind of came back around at the end of my 20s to how can I help other young people who have been I've been in their shoes. So that's what Not Therapy is about, is really helping people young people specifically, who maybe therapy isn't the right fit for them right now or isn't getting, the results they think it's going to get them immediately. So we do lived experience coaching, and all of our coaches have been through, similar experiences of really dealing with some tough times in their youth. And now we can help people based on that.
Yeah, and I love the words lived experience, because that is what I believe I want to teach people is how do you trust your lived experience above all else, even evidence, quote unquote, based practices of mental health, right? And so when those things aren't working, I believe truly you are an expert. Not Therapy is such an amazing place for people to go, even before they try mental health, honestly, in the industry of mental health, because, there are, one of the things that we've talked about before is sometimes it's not what is the next step for me. It's who is going to care, who is really going to care about what I'm going through. And it's not, I don't know what your experience was like, right? And so to have someone like you or Colin or the great coaches that you guys are now bringing on to work with someone who's, at their wit's end, whether it be the parent or the child, I just think what you're doing is irreplaceable. Like, I don't know what else to say. It's unique and irreplaceable. But I do want to hear your story. This is about understanding a little bit more about how you got to the place where you are. Right. And I, again, as a psychological therapist, I talk a lot about the ego. Right. And so, from some of your earliest memories, you said this all started unfolding for you basically at 16, but something got you there. Right. And so when you think about like what you grew up believing about yourself and who you were in the world and developing this ego, what do you remember your ego telling you back in those days?
Yeah. It's so funny, because even though I've been doing years and years of therapy, and again, we do love therapy at Not Therapy, and so it's definitely not anti-therapy, but it comes back to just, as as a therapist, a lot of the similar places and wounds that for me started way younger than 16. So I think in terms of ego and just like what kind of how I started like understanding my place in the world. So I grew up mostly in Utah, and my family, so it's a very religious place, but my family
Yeah.
isn't religious. And my parents are just huge skiers. So that's why we were raised there, even though they're from the Bay
Okay.
Area. So, so anywho, so I was raised there, and I'm the oldest of three kids. I have two younger brothers we're all pretty close in age. But for me, I went to this, small school there were a lot of Mormon kids there. And
Mm-hmm.
again, like honestly, now I've done a lot of healing. So now I look back on it and it's kind of fine. But as a kid, I really just always was like, why am I excluded from things? Why am I different than other people? Why are people saying like they can't hang out with me, or that I'm like going to hell because I'm not Mormon? Like kids are kind of crazy. Like,
yeah.
just various things like that. But essentially just feeling kind of othered and excluded, and having to really, even at a young age, I remember just like having this conflict of like, well, but I don't like what they're doing to me, and I don't necessarily believe in the things they believe in the same way. But I also know I'm a good person. So like, am I just kind of not good enough? That's like often kind of that belief or like tape that plays in my head of like, how can I be good enough essentially to, deserve to have like a place in this world? And, so I think that definitely really shaped me along. And the second thing that really shaped me from a young age was my middle brother. He was really, really sick with a super rare like autoimmune disease when he was young.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And I was like, he was in kindergarten and I was in first grade or something like that. And so he was in the hospital for like many, many months straight, and they kind of just didn't know what was going on with him. He's fine now. But for a long time, I didn't really understand what was going on. And like my parents were obviously like super distressed and having to kind of take shifts staying at the hospital with him. And so without my parents even saying anything or doing anything as the oldest, then I'm just like, okay, have to take care of myself, like button everything up. I don't necessarily deserve to like take up space. Again, looking back, I'm like, I don't think my parents really did anything to like deeply reinforce that belief. That's kind of just how I, adapted to it. And so I think those kind of two things are something I come back to a lot from like the earliest ages of where is my place in the world? How do I see myself? How do I need to act like in order to be okay?
Yeah. So it sounds like you said, I'm not enough. That's a pretty typical first egoic, right, response to life. Sounds like you had it from a lot of different angles, right? You had it from both, growing up in a place where I get your parents want to go skiing, right? But that is truly, I mean, I've met enough clients actually that are in my area that are from Utah that experience that same thing. And, that intense Mormonism, and those kids don't mean you any harm. They're just spouting off their parents' egoic belief, right?
Exactly.
And that's the worst part, is the collective ego that's already available and present for all of us to siphon from, right? Your parents sound loving. They just kind of want to have a good time. They want to live out in Utah, and then they are saddled with not understanding how this is going to affect you as a child to feel that othered, right? That not enough, but also probably a little bit defensive and angry about that, like, but I do want to feel enough, right? And then, like you said, you're the oldest, your parents are struggling with a crisis of health for your brother. And then, so my guess is that your defense mechanism is, as Freud would say, to your ego of feeling not enough, was to be like, well, then I'll just be alone. I'll just isolate myself. I'll just take care of myself. I'll become super independent. Yeah. And then how did that metastasize, I guess, for lack of a better word, into, thinking that maybe some of your behaviors, right? So that's why I said, like, we act from our inner environment, and those exacerbate into egoic behaviors. What were those as a kid that you started doing?
I mean, like you said, just like hyper independent, like from a young age, again, also has like served me in a lot of ways.
Absolutely. But, like, the ego always serves us.
Yes. Exactly. So, There's the double-edged sword there, but like always very independent. But then to your point of like being alone, always had a lot of friends. I mean, I'm still best friends with some of my friends from when I was 7 back in Utah, and we all live in New York together now. And like, but I didn't like understand the concept of like when I'm struggling internally, like I just like went inward when I was younger. So I didn't share anything with them. I didn't share anything with my parents. And again, I was so young, so you don't really know to do that. But it was like, that was kind of just my defense mechanism, is like, I can't be struggling. Like then, you know, I'm kind of like, if I'm struggling, that means, yeah, I'm not good enough, I'm worthless or whatever. So just really internalizing it. And so it felt in a way, even though, again, I was social, did sports, did all the things, like I just felt very isolated, like in my own kind of internal world, I guess you could say.
Yeah. And in a weird way, not being religious probably made you, and you tell me if I'm right, but without having any base of spirituality, and you may have been like, then there's nothing for me. I don't know. Right. Like, did that happen? Yeah.
I mean, not necessarily there's nothing for me, but I think when I think back, I'm like, I wonder if it would have been different if we had just been like gone to some other church, you know, and that wasn't Mormon, but I had kind of like something to bounce the like Mormonism off of a little bit and like have that kind of maybe spiritual connection, because my family's not at all like anti-religion, but like just even my parents weren't raised like going to church. So like we don't really have that like inherent kind of maybe spiritual practice, or at least how it looks for a lot of other people. So it just felt like I had to just fully rely on myself again, which I could pretty much do in a lot of ways, because that high achiever, always straight A's, like even when I really started struggling as like we move forward, like with my mental health more as a teenager, I was still like, I was like running away from home, but like getting a 4.0. Like, I don't know how it was happening. Like, it was really bizarre. Like I had to like anchor myself to certain things, and like the achievement and like my super high, like unreasonable standards and expectations for myself were like, I was like, if I lose that, then I'm like really kind of like gone essentially. So
so your ego said, okay, well then if I'm going to be alone, I'm going to be the greatest alone person ever. I'm going to achieve as much as I can. But of course that doesn't help necessarily. And like you said, maybe started running away from home, or, you know, feeling that there's certain behaviors that you said you were doing to anchor yourself. Right. So, you know, again, like just to reiterate, you know, this is what our egos do is they first have this sense of, I'm not enough, I'm lacking something. There's something outside of me that I can do to fill that. Right. And then, you know, and we also don't want to show people we're struggling. So we build defense mechanisms. And none of this is available to your parents. They're just seeing you do okay outwardly. They're seeing you in sports. Like, that's the other thing. Parents don't necessarily know. Don't ever blame yourself, parents. They don't necessarily know what their kids in their environment are. And even if you ask, sometimes they don't answer you, right? Like you said, I perceived that my parents were already dealing with enough with my brother. Why would I want to put that on them? Like, there's so many, you know, a lot of times I think parents struggle reaching out for help, like not therapy, because they feel guilty. It's like, no, let's go. It's not your fault. Maybe they didn't share it with you, or maybe you didn't know, but like, I didn't know about not therapy until somebody accidentally mentioned it to me in a therapy session when I was a therapist. I was like, wait, what? This exists? I'm like, oh my gosh. So yeah. So kind of moving forward, that how did you finally release some of these egoic tendencies and say there has to be something more for me? Like, what was that moment like for you, or was it a long period of time? How did that work for you?
I mean, it's definitely been like slow releasing of different parts of it, and then like taking it back and then releasing it again and all that stuff. But I think like then, you know, I started really because I think I just internalized all these beliefs and like had this crazy kind of self-critic going on. Obviously, then, I mean, maybe not obviously, but then of course I like inevitably got depressed, like, and as a teenager felt all this pain, like deep pain and like deep self-hatred, even more so than when I was younger, that I was just like that I also didn't understand, because I also was like, I don't want to hate myself. Like if someone, I always said, I was like, if someone give me the cheat codes or a playbook to like not hate myself and to enjoy my life, I'll do it. I just like don't know how to do it. And so that for me was like a big, that's when, I really started, feeling suicidal. Is just being like, there's nothing, if this is how life is. And of course, when you haven't gotten through that period of time, like the first time you go through it, then you just don't know there's like another side to this. So
I love that you said, I don't want to hate myself, which is to me the first sort of split of like, I don't want to hate myself, meaning I don't want to hate my ego's experience anymore. I don't want to hate that I created this other version, this egoic sense of separation. I mean, that, it sounds like you're finally realizing like, okay, there's these two perspectives, right? The one that hates herself and the one that doesn't want to hate that.
Right.
I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
As powerfully painful as that was, I think that sounds like the first moment you thought there has to be something.
Yeah, I think so. And then it took like a few years of just, again, as a teenager, still continuing to spiral and doing things where I was like trying to kind of problem solve, I thought, with like even like the self-harm, substance abuse, like running away. I was like, I'm trying to like not be in this pain. And these are kind of, I didn't know what like a coping skill was like, so I don't know. And so I tried all those things. Then, I get sent to, a wilderness program, like, because I'd gotten so bad over the course of, especially like 1 year, ended up moving back to like California when I was in high school. And so that just like spiraled. And so for me, I went to
your friends.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I then didn't have any of my other kind of, not even distractions, but I guess like support system too. And, that was a tough transition. And so what my parents said, okay, like sending her to a wilderness therapy program, and then like ultimately, therapeutic boarding school after that. And that's where I did my last 2 years of high school. And that was kind of, wilderness was good. Then I had a moment in therapeutic boarding school. And this was kind of like I would say like, I don't know, rock bottom or come to Jesus moment or whatever of like, and I think what you were calling it is like that awareness of the ego, and kind of almost like you have to surrender to the whole process of it, of just like, I'm so tired of like the negative impacts that living out of this like ego centric version of myself is having on my life, that like, whatever, I'm like gonna try like not care about the ego and just like do something. And that's what I think when a lot of people come to therapy or come, coaching or like travel the world or change like a big thing about their life. Like I ran away from my therapeutic boarding school after like a month or two there. And I didn't get very far. Like I essentially just like walked away. And then I was like, what is happening here? And then like they came and like got me back. But also I was like, my heart wasn't really in it. I was just like, that was my pattern. And I was like, I was just like, okay, wow, I've done 5 months of like wilderness and therapy and I'm not healed. Like this is bullshit. And so but that was just a moment. And then I had to wear slippers for like 2 months. I had to wear a bright orange shirt for 2 months. Like I was like a run risk essentially. So like, and I had to be within arm's length of a staff member at all, like 24/7, even when I was like sleeping and stuff. So that was just like, I had zero privileges, zero control over anything in my life at that moment. And I was like, whatever, I'm here until I'm 18. I will somewhat do somewhat of what they're saying to do, which is like look inward and do some therapy and like really get uncomfortable and challenge yourself. But I was like, fine, I don't have any better ideas. I'll just do this. If it doesn't work, I'm like, this is depressing, but I was like, I'll just kill myself then. Like, it's fine. But if it does work, great. Because I was just like, all I genuinely care about now is like, if I can't figure out how to be happy just in general, like, or at least again, then there's no point to any of this stuff like called life. So that was my only thing. I was like, all I care about right now is being happy. And I don't really care about what now. I mean, I had already felt like I lost a lot of things at that point. So
Yeah.
We're kind of starting from zero here. So that was a big moment where I think I was ready to consciously like challenge that, the ego and those kind of patterns and thoughts I had developed.
Yeah. And I would say that that is like the last step for the ego is like, let's push as hard as we can to get control. Right. And so
Mhm.
you're like thinking, okay, screw it. I'm going to control my life. I'm leaving. Right. And then to have, that sort of horrific, I would say kind of traumatic experience of people restraining you to some extent. Right. Or to making so obvious that you're a flight risk. But then you said that was the moment that I said, okay, I need to surrender. I don't know to what, and I don't know how, but at least I can acknowledge that there is that first step of surrendering.
Mhm.
Like everything I have tried up to this point doesn't work. And I love that you said all I wanted to do was be happy or happy again. And you must have remembered some semblance of being younger and being free, which again, the soul and intuition reminds you you are free and liberated to do this. And you must have thought, okay, if I'm physically restrained, there must be an inner freedom I can look into or create. And
Mhm.
that opened up something in you, right? Did you eventually start to understand that I have a soul? Like what was your path around
I
that?
think yes. I think how I was kind of introduced to it though was it's almost like that like inner child, like that
Mm.
kind of like I hate the word pure just because that's like feels religious to me, but like that like total like completely valuable like purest form of yourself that like
Yeah.
you were when you were a baby or whatever, like when
Yeah.
nothing had like impacted you yet, right?
Yes.
And so um like the good thing, one thing in hindsight that was really great, I think, about my experience with treatment, because again, that was pretty much my first experience with therapy. And so was they did a ton of inner child work. Like it was
Mm.
almost all inner child work from what I remember, like in individual therapy with your family as a collective. We had all these community like therapeutic workshops and stuff with all these other teenage girls who were there with me. And so, which is kind of funny to think about because I was only like 16 at the time. So I wasn't like that. I wasn't that far removed from like that age of like my inner child, quite frankly.
Mm.
And so,
Mhm.
and that
Mhm.
maybe like soul piece of it. And so a lot of that first like work for me was about going back to that happy or whatever, what I kind of was calling like happy or carefree, maybe curious, like version of myself that I
Yeah.
did know 100% existed at one point. Um, and continually coming back to that and kind of and doing the reparenting work a bit and doing, just kind of getting started on that journey of how do I tell that version of myself that like I'm enough when I was,
Mhm.
because that's again the first things that kind of took me
Yep.
away from that version of myself.
Yeah, exactly. That is so important for you to go back to the moments and say, I forgive the belief that I'm not enough. And when did I create that belief? And when was the ego born? That sense of feeling separate. And so it sounds like you did a lot of great work. Do you think, looking back, do you wish that not therapy would have been introduced to you at some point? Like, do you like, man, if I had had it introduced maybe like a half a year in or something, that, my life would be different? Or maybe you don't think that, maybe you're like, I needed all that. Like what, now that you own not therapy?
Yeah, right. I know. Well, that's what we did. We were like, what did we need? I mean, yes, after treatment, but truly it was what did we need before treatment that would
Yeah.
have like been that kind of, quote unquote intervention or thing that would have, to your point, like, yeah, maybe a little bit into that journey could have helped. Cause I just wanted, clearly it was lacking kind of the spiritual aspect of my life because I was always like, I just want an older sister. Like, but I
Mm,
just wanted like a guide essentially to
yeah.
be like, hey, I've been through this, like you're gonna be okay, essentially. And
Yeah.
here's how you're gonna be okay. And like let me help you do that. And
Yeah.
so I kind of had to become that version that to like the younger version of myself. And like not therapy is a direct like result of having to do that for myself. So
Yeah.
it definitely would have helped, I believe. Although then I'm like, well, then I wouldn't have created it had I not gone through all of
Right.
that stuff. And I also do think like, and some of my friends from treatment too, like didn't at all really engage in the therapeutic work and didn't for years after. I genuinely like was trying to engage in it
Yeah.
as best as I like knew how. That I think was very helpful to do it at such a young age, because I still had 10 more years of brain development to go. Like I still had, you know, I was like rewiring, could quickly rewire a lot of these neural pathways just by this
Great point.
mindset shifts, therapeutic work, belief in myself. Like after that moment of like getting through treatment, never once have I ever felt even close to suicidal again. I've been I've been more depressed as an adult than I ever was like as a kid, you know, but like never at all, like just a very, very, very deep trust like in myself that, again, this is kind of ego-y, but that I'll get through it and I'll take care of myself. Like double-edged sword, but like that experience of doing that therapeutic work, which a lot of the kids that we work with have come from treatment and have started to do that, even if they're tired of it for now. They're probably going to take a break for a year or two, but like they'll come back to it. And doing that at such a young age, I think was so positive for me. But I wouldn't have been able to do that with like once a week therapy at home. I don't think. I don't like this was just, it was all consuming in my whole entire life for almost 2 years. So, you know.
Yeah. So it sounds like though maybe you went back a little bit more into your ego right in your 20s where you're like, but there's still something outside of me. I need to be a high achiever and do these sort of engineer, because you didn't develop that therapy as soon as you got out, right? You're like, you weren't intuitively following maybe this this actual life mission, right, of starting that therapy. And so like that's the other thing about the ego, it's tricky, right? It will just find another way to encourage us to
100%.
think that there's something outside of us, right? Like the next job, the next achievement. And so
100%.
like we have to also recognize that ego does not go away. It might just get smarter. You know, like I've heard people say it becomes a better chess player. It's like, all right, well now I know what Haley's doing.
No,
Okay,
it's
got
so
it,
true.
right? Yeah, and so then
So
it sounds like your ego took you towards a lot of high achievement, which you said was one of the better defense mechanisms that you developed as a child. And then when did that break for you? We're like, wait a second, I'm ready to follow my actual intuition. I'm ready to follow my soul's path, which is to create net therapy. What was that moment like?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was like maybe two parts of that more specifically. Like, yeah, again, I went to an Ivy League. I studied chemical engineering. I did the master's degree. I did all this stuff. Like, and it kept getting to points like where I would literally achieve everything on my list, like before I even thought I'd achieve it, and then be like, pretty much immediately have that like crash of like, this is not. I thought this would make me happy. This would make me enough, right? And so that happened. Essentially, that manifested through career pivots and choices, because I can switch and learn most things quickly and make like a pivot easily, which the trust came from that too. So like that was great, but it just kept happening. And I was like data science. Then I started moving more towards, I was running this STEM program for high schoolers in New York, like this after school program. And hated some parts of that, but loved, like that was kind of coaching, like working with teenagers and coaching them. And again, not in a mental health capacity, although it kind of all related back to that anyway with these kids. And so, you know, so that started happening. COVID hits. I'm like, okay, I know what's essentially, I was just so depressed during COVID too, and was still working with all these kids who are also super depressed. And I was like, I had also been in AA, by the way, for like 5 years. I was sober in AA. So that was another thing that like they talk about ego deflation a lot there, or that was like the first time I heard that term. So that kind of just kept happening at various points. The things I thought my ego said I thought would be make me whole, no. And it wouldn't even help like at all. So I'm like, okay. So then during COVID, I thought, how can I help these young people? They're all struggling with the same thing. They can't talk to each other though. They're like too ashamed, don't have like the words to do it. They don't want to do therapy. They can't afford to do therapy. Honestly, probably a lot of them didn't even really need therapy at that point. Like this was just general kind of young people in COVID. And so I was like, okay, well, I really missed AA, like just the group aspect of it and the anonymity and you can show up and say whatever you want to say and no one can judge you and you meet other people who are going through the same thing as you. So I essentially recreated that style, but online, like at online groups for the young girls I was working with at the time.
Okay.
Like online, just because I was like, I know this will help you. I don't have enough time to talk to all of you one-on-one, so we're just going to do this. And even though they technically knew each other, I put them in like a space where they didn't know who was who, essentially. And so they could have these like really insane, vulnerable, cool conversations that like I did not see anywhere else on the internet. So that's how I like started my first company called Chill Pill, was based off of that. I literally just created that because I was like, these girls need to take a chill pill. And then like we'd go to these groups, and I was using these groups, even though these girls were 10 years younger than me, I was using these groups like equally to help myself. Like I was sharing very openly about my life. And so, which was amazing. And so but then I had always wanted to start a company. I always wanted to do tech. I always wanted to fundraise. So immediately went into that, told my story. But that was like maybe the first moment, sorry, to get back to your question, like where I started coming back to this idea of like, oh wait, I think I do have like, here's my purpose in life. Like I felt very connected to, I want to help young people, young women specifically at that time, but like young women improve their mental health, like period, and like live the best version of their lives and like help each other do that. And but I never wanted to be a therapist. So I was like, I didn't know I could do that, but that was one where I was like, oh, and I can make this into a company and a whole career, and people will give me money to do it, which was also kind of insane. So again, it was still kind of going back and forth between that, but that was the first kind of connection where it's like, that does feel like my soul's purpose, which was very reassuring to like, even be like, even if this company doesn't work, this is what I'm working on the rest of my life. Like that's how it really felt. And that company did not work, the first one. So
but I love what you're doing, because what the ego hates is to be exposed. And you provided a way for people to expose their egos and it not feel shameful, which is another egoic response, right? It's like you can't show that you're hurting. And so that sounds like a brilliant first step that your soul took, to be like, this is more than just me. This is more than about me, right? There's a bunch of us who are in relationship and can be in relationship. And like you said, I also think it's a soul's journey when it's not for personal gain. It's for you created a powerful situation for a lot of people, which, and yourself included, right? So to me, that was more a soul-based activity, right? Like you're moving forward. And then I guess, for just because we're really running out of time, I guess, what can you say about not therapy, right? At this point, like, this is what I want people to know, and to get out of it based on everything you've experienced and watched the clients have, the things you wish you had that the clients are actually receiving, right?
Yeah. I really do think it's all built on mentorship and guidance from people who've been where you're at now.
Yep.
And like, again, and that can be, I talk to my clients about like the benefits therapy has had and help them find good therapists and stuff. Like it doesn't have to be, we're doing everything for our clients, but we can help point them in the right direction and just essentially be those like, again, I said this before, but we're like, hey, we've done all these things. Here are the cheat codes. So you don't have to spend 10 years going, doing this part of our journey that we've already done. And we can help you kind of like, sidestep or get through more quickly. And like, here are the things we've learned, because that mentorship piece in not just career, but like I had sponsors, like all of this stuff in my life, like throughout my 20s and still to this day, I'm like, that has been the most impactful people in my life. And that has, those people have changed the trajectory of my life multiple times. And so how can we give that to young people who don't necessarily even know what they're seeking or where they're going? That's totally fine. But the whole thing is we want them to be living a life that they generally enjoy. Like nothing is worse than hating your life. Like
that's right.
So how do we empower them to do, use tools that we teach them or that they already know? How do we encourage them on a day-to-day basis? Because that's really what we're doing. We're like, we'll be your biggest cheerleader until you can become your own biggest cheerleader. Like, we'll be there to cheer you on, encourage you, like very much in the weeds with you, and push you when you need and want to be pushed, like give you space to vent and share and not feel shame. We do not judge anyone for like what they're going through or what they're sharing with us, because we've done and seen a lot of things. So
you have.
Yeah. So we just like, I think it's giving that non-judgmental space, and then that guidance of like that older sibling you like wish you always had or whatever, right? Or that older cousin or someone who just is so invested in you, but also I'm not I'm invested in you building a life you like living, but it can look however you want it to look. I'm not invested in it looking one way or another, or being a certain thing. So,
when I feel like
those kids connect the dots, really.
Yeah, I mean, not therapy is really on the kids' terms, right?
Yeah.
Which is not what you get in therapeutic boarding school, I'm sure. You know, it's not on your terms when you get to, and what you get to share and how you get to share, and, you know, be able to say, like you said, vulnerable things to somebody who's clearly been through the ringer themselves, which is very different sometimes than a therapist that's like myself who has not, right? Like I could talk all day, but I'd rather the person learn from someone of the lived experience itself, right? The person that what you've gone to. And I appreciate what you're saying about being their cheerleader, because, you know, I love that song. I think it's by Nilo, where he says, "Let me love you until you learn to love yourself." And that's what I meant when I said, it's not what is the next evidence-based practice. It's who is literally going to love you until you learn to love yourself. And I do believe you guys do that. I actually believe you do love them, right? You're like, I love your journey. I love your potential. I know what that feels like. And I won't give up on you. You know, it's like, you know what I mean? It's not like you say, oh, well, that treatment resistant kid. No, it's not what's happening. And so again, like that's what I feel about not therapy is there's no such thing as a treatment resistant kid. They need the who. They need that person who is like, dude, without saying anything, I already got you. Like, I already get it. You don't have to repeat yourself. You don't have to tell me, you know. And yeah, I can't say enough about what you guys do. And I so appreciate you coming on and talking. My last question for you is, what did you have to unlearn about from your ego to do not therapy and to keep staying on path with this, because this has got to be scary at moments of like, do we know what we're doing? Yeah.
I mean, I feel like there's, again, it's like I keep having to unlearn. It's still a process around that, like whatever the results from a business perspective or even like a client perspective, right? Of like what our clients are getting out of it and their outcomes, like that is not a reflection on my worth as a person.
Yes.
That's like, and that's very hard in this. I'm sure you can relate as a therapist. Like that's can be very difficult in like that, the business of helping others. But again, ultimately it's just about, can we have these kids have a good experience, have like one new experience, one seed planted in their life that helps set them up for future success and happiness. Great, we've done our job. But even if I can't do that with everyone, which you can't, you know, so that's okay. And so that's why this job can be so challenging, I think, but it's like so good because you have to work on that ego every day.
Sure. Awesome. Well, thanks again so much for being here. I so appreciate your time. And I really hope that you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.